Did you see him run? Did you see him run?
Okay, hi, I'm Pete Hammond, and I'm going to moderate this session here with Tom Holland. Welcome, Tom. We've got some questions for you, but
How are
Tom
you? It's nice to see you again.
yeah, you too. And what a performance here. We're here to talk about the limited series on Apple called The Crowded Room, which you did. It first aired in June, and it got quite a lot of reaction. It is a fascinating story, Tom. And I got to say, it's based on or inspired by a 1981 book by Daniel Keyes called The Minds of Billy Milligan. And I have heard over the decades all kinds of talk about turning this into a movie, and actors involved at one time, Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt. You've heard all kinds of names. It never got made. And now finally it did as a limited series, which seems to be the perfect format. But can you tell us briefly how this came into your life, how this character, and you play Danny Sullivan, in this by Akiva Goldsman, came up with the trick to finally get it made and get it produced along with you. You are an executive producer on it as well.
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, one of the things that excited me most about the project was the idea that all of these people that I really looked up to had at some point tried to turn this book into, you know, a piece of live action entertainment. And I was kind of flirting with the idea of being one of the people that figured that out. The story of how I came on board is very conventional. I was shooting Spider-Man 3 and having the time of my life, and sort of sent my agents off to look for whatever would be next. And they told me about this guy, Akiva, who wanted to sit down with me and pitch me this idea. I'd always said to my agents that my favorite film and favorite performance still to this day ever is Primal Fear with Edward Norton.
Yep.
And this opportunity felt like my version of that. So I was very excited by that. Meeting with Akiva, we immediately hit it off. We went for a meeting at the Soho House on Sunset at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon for a lunch, and we left at about 11 p.m. So we immediately became fast friends. We knew that we had this great connection that would translate on screen and on set, and it was a very easy decision for me.
Yeah, and it's so, you know, finally doing it as a 10-part limited series gave you so much more room to explore this and things. And we don't even, you know, it's obviously about mental health, dissociative identity disorder, but we don't know that for a few episodes. It's kind of like it twists and turns, and we're not sure where it's going, which I thought was an interesting way of approaching it too. Some people might not have, because they, you know, they want to know right away, what's this about?
Well, I think the reason for that was that, you know, it obviously it adds to the kind of thriller aspect of the show. Yeah. But really what was most important to us is there is a terrible stigma against people that have been abused or people that suffer from mental health. So what we wanted to try and do in our storytelling was give the audience 4 episodes of time to fall in love with Danny, to understand who he was, to feel his vulnerability and to see his empathy and his kindness before we started layering in the idea that this young man was very troubled. We wanted people to fall in love with him. One of our main goals in telling this story was telling a story about mental health, but from a positive point of view, about the idea of healing, about the idea of the bravery of asking for help. And to tell that story authentically, we needed to have this gradual journey to Danny's mental situation, because otherwise it would have just become about his condition.
His condition, and you know, and we've seen many movies and many things, Sybil, Three Faces of Eve, different things where they become the characters. This one I've never seen done like this. With they have the alters, other actors playing this in your head. I thought that was a really interesting idea to bring to this story.
I completely agree. When Akiva told me that, you know, that was really the thing that kind of got my juices going. You know, I mean, sitting down in the casting room and figuring out who we wanted to play these alters, and watching audition tapes and watching people's shows that they'd done before to try and figure out how on earth are we going to bring these characters to life? And then secondly, how on earth am I going to end up mimicking them to try and convince the audience that we are one person? So to be perfectly honest, as a young actor, it was such a wonderful challenge. And I'm really lucky I got to do it with really wonderful people. Our cast was amazing. But it was really daunting. It was a daunting idea. It took a lot of work. My voice coach and I were in it all the time. My acting coach and I were, you know, trying to push the physicalities to the absolute limit. And it was difficult, but ultimately super rewarding.
That particularly with the vocal coach, the different accents that you had to master here and match. I mean, that's an acting challenge, you know, that's extraordinary to do, much more out of the norm of a lot of acting assignments. That's really like you're doing it all. You're your own ensemble, man.
Thank you.
So working with the coaches you just mentioned too, what level of research did you pour into this? I'm sure you had the book, you had different things, you had the script, but Akiva Goldsman, who is the main showrunner here and the guy behind it creatively, both of his parents were psychologists too. And part of his life is this, and he says he pours part of his own life into this too. So I'm just wondering the levels of research working with him. What did you put together to make this role work?
Well, it started with the book. You know, Akiva has expressed publicly now his own past and his own experience with childhood trauma, but that came very late in our relationship, before we'd started shooting, but it wasn't something he'd offered up in our first meeting. So really, it just started with the book. You know, we were going through the book, we were picking out things that interested us. I was, you know, on this rapid education line of learning about this how powerful the human mind can be. Our script supervisor was also a clinical psychiatrist, so to have her was incredible, because she was also a line of support, and she would challenge Akiva on some things, which I thought was really interesting. And a testament to Akiva's character, he would very often listen to her, which I really appreciated. But research, you know, we spoke to psychologists, we'd read the book. Eventually I had to put the book down, because when we decided to pivot to a piece of fiction, I was so married to the literature that I had to eventually kind of forget about it, take what I'd learned and moved on. But the research that we did was extensive. I mean, from watching documentaries to watching videos of people online who switch, and just from speaking to Akiva and Jodie, it was an amazing experience.
How did your background as a dancer, everyone knows you started off, you know, that way, and Billy Elliot and everything. Did that help you with the physicality? I mean, that kind of training that you had too?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps. Being able to kind of manipulate your body and move to different rhythms is really helpful. You know, you can devise characters based off 8 counts and walk almost to the beat of their own drum, you know. Right. And something that was really exciting to do with this show was that they all had their own drum beats. So we could kind of exist in different rhythms, which was a really nice way to start the physicality off in a very different way for each character.
You were in a room for a lot of time opposite a terrific actor named Amanda Seyfried. And you really had that dynamic going. How did you develop that between the two of you to make those scenes pop the way they do?
To be perfectly honest with you, we were just really lucky that it worked out. Amanda came onto the project, and I'm talking about the shooting time, really late. We'd been shooting for a good few months before Amanda started working. And, you know, I was so deep into the production that I didn't really have the time to be doing these chemistry reads and to be working with her off camera. It was really, we had one rehearsal day before we started shooting together. And then we just dove in at the deep end. You know, we were with each other every day in those chairs, you know, and it was tough. I mean, we must have had well over 200 pages of dialogue to do together, so almost an entire film, and it was really tough. But I'm very lucky that she was so gracious. She was able to bring such a positive light to the set. You know, at times when you're doing something that is so dark and so heavy and touching on subject matter that most people can't comprehend, it's important to keep a set lighthearted so that that kind of energy doesn't bleed into people's personal lives. And Amanda is so good at bringing that light.
We've talked over the years on many roles that you've had, from the Impossible to obviously Spider-Man and that whole world, and Cherry, and different challenging roles. I've heard you said this is the toughest, the hardest role that you've tackled. Is that true?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, without a doubt. You know, for a whole collection of reasons. You know, the subject matter is tough. The character is incredibly intricate. You know, there's also multiple characters, so we're traversing different arcs. The time frame is really difficult. Shooting for 10 months is something that I'm not used to. You know, I'm really lucky to make films, and the kind of films I make, I get to make with some of the best people in the business. So they're very sleek, they're efficient. So moving to television and working for 10 months, you know, it was a real shock to the system. And then shooting in New York. I love New York. It's an amazing city, but it's a really tough place to work. You can't lock off the streets. It's busy, it's loud, it's overstimulating at times when you're trying to be really focused. So there was a whole bunch of reasons. The other thing as well is I'd never swapped directors. I'd never done that before. You know, on the small amount of TV I did when I was much younger, I had one director, Peter Kosminski, he directed the entire show. So to be bouncing from director to director, I found very difficult.
I find that fascinating too, and talking to directors who just pop in to a limited series, like on episode 3 or 4, and they have to follow a whole template and keep it in line there. But I haven't really thought about it from the point of view of the actor. You're watching all these different directors, so how are you helping them, you know, adapt to what you guys are doing? Because like I mentioned, you're also a producer on this too.
Yeah, well, it's sort of as best we try to help as best we can, really. You know, I really try to always set the precedent that the director is the boss. I always call my directors boss. It's like a, you know, it just sort of sets a level playing field. And, you know, it was tough. As you know, in the show, there are certain scenes that play out twice. Right. Once with Danny's altar, and then once as Danny being the altar. But because those are from different episodes, because of the DGA, we'd have to shoot those at the same time, but with different crews and obviously the different director. So we'd sometimes have both directors on set directing the same scene, but with different camera operators and different DOPs. And it was just so difficult to try and wrap your head around it. So it was just about being focused and being patient and trying your best to help them understand where you're at. You know, it's an incredibly difficult character for one person to wrap their head around, let alone 4 or 5. So it wasn't easy, but it ended up being really positive.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've got some questions here to ask you from our various journalists who are with us today. One is Juan Ayala from Media Village. With such a challenging and exhausting role, and then he's got parentheses with an S, roles, what did you walk away from this experience having learned?
I think what did I learn? You mean like learn about myself or learn about the world of mental health?
Yeah, it does.
I'm going to go with myself.
Yeah.
I really learned that I'm far more resilient than I had ever thought. You know, this was a job that really promised to beat me up, and it did. And I'm really proud that I never cracked. You know, I never let the pressure get to me. There were real times where this show was testing me in every way possible, emotionally, logistically. You know, I was exhausted. I was, you know, bold enough to ask for a break when I needed it. So I guess the thing that I learned about myself throughout the process of making this show is I am far more resilient than I ever thought I was.
You took time off though, after I mean, 10 months, a long time. You just took how long did you take off to sort of decide what you want to do next?
Well, interestingly, I haven't worked since The Crowded Room.
Oh,
So
wow.
for the first time in my career since, God, I must have been, I don't know, maybe 15. I'm 27 now. This is the first time in my life that I haven't had something to come out. I've been working, so lucky, I've booked and blessed, you know, that I've always had something to come out. I'll go to another job knowing that I've got The Devil All the Time to come out, Spider-Man 2 to come out. And now everything I've done is out. So I'm in this, you know, very liberating and freeing experience of not knowing what I have next. I don't know what I have to come out because it's all come and gone. So yeah, it's been an odd time, but I'm really enjoying the kind of reset, and it feels like I'm starting the next chapter of my career.
And in line with that, Scott Orlin from Cinema Germany, can you talk about the creative fulfillment of producing and how you've become acclimated to the business side of the industry? Because that's a whole other new thing that you're involved with now.
I really enjoy producing. I enjoy producing because there is so much creativity that happens way before you get to a set, you know, whether it's production design or costume design, casting, cinematography, picking locations. There are endless decisions that get made that really can make or break a show. And not to say that I was making those decisions, but I just loved being a part of those conversations and weighing in where I thought I could, you know, add value to the conversation. But most importantly, just learning from people who have been doing this their entire lives and know the film industry inside out, and, you know, just kind of broadening my view on what it means to make a piece of entertaining art, you know. So I just really enjoyed it. I loved the fact that Akiva was so welcoming and really took me under his wing to help me understand what we were trying to achieve. I loved the editing process. You know, Akiva really opened the door for me to be a part of that. And every week we would sit down with the editors and we would go through the cuts and we would all give notes and we were chopping and changing. Apple were amazing during the edit. They were so creative, and they created an environment where if we had an idea, even an idea as crazy as like, what happens if episode 5 becomes episode 1? Apple were like, yeah, fucking try it, see what happens. And we tried it and it kind of worked. And we were like, oh, we really think something's here. And then we started pushing it. And once you make episode 5, episode 1, it almost makes none of the other episodes make sense.
Right.
So then we ended up chopping it all up, and it just was so fun. It was so fun and so fulfilling, and I learned so much. And I'm so grateful that Akiva and Apple gave me the opportunity to do so.
Do you want to continue? And the television side of things, limited series offers you opportunities for projects you'll never get made as motion pictures, as this one showed. So is that something you're looking forward to in producing and starring?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it just gives you the opportunity to explore a character in a ways that you perhaps wouldn't in a solo film. You know, that said, I'm no stranger to a sequel. So I have had the opportunity to kind of grow with characters as I've grown myself.
Yeah.
Which is a real privilege and something that I don't take for granted at all. But I did really enjoy it. I just read a book, actually, which absolutely blew my mind, which would only be possible to do as a TV show. But the protagonist is in his late 30s. So I'm hoping that no one makes it for about 15 years so that I can make it one day as a TV show.
Oh, okay. So you're not going to tell us what that is at this point,
I don't want anyone to know about it because I really want to do it myself. And I know that if I start talking about it, people will go, oh, yeah, that is a great book. Yeah, we should make that into a TV show.
Exactly. Keep it quiet, you know, and you might have something to do when you're 38.
Yeah, exactly. If I give up now, if there's no work left, then I can start writing that. And by the time I'm 38, I'll be back on set again.
Let's see. Here is another question from Yishai Casales. Hi, Tom. After such an intense performance, how long did this character stay with you after shooting? Was it difficult to shake him off and move on? Or are you, I'll add to that. Are you one of those actors that can just go home and, you know, have dinner and not worry about it? Or, is he still there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say that I take the character home. I've always been very good at separating the difference between my personal life and my professional life. I love costume and I love hair and makeup. I love trying to disappear in a character. That's kind of something I learned from Jake Gyllenhaal. He's really good at using hair and makeup to his advantage without it looking like a costume. And for this project, to be perfectly honest with you, I really didn't want to wear a wig because I just don't like wigs. I find them really uncomfortable. And I knew 10 months of wearing a wig every day was just going to be a real pain. So I grew my hair out and I ultimately ended up cutting my hair with the bangs.
Yeah.
And that was something I found really difficult because at least with a wig, you can take it off. And then when you go home, you're yourself. But with this job, I was taking Danny home with me in his kind of aesthetic. So that was something I found very difficult. But the day we wrapped, we were shooting at the studio in the Bronx. And as soon as they called cut and the show was over, I gave everyone a hug. I said my thank yous. I went straight upstairs and immediately shaved my head. And the moment that happened, I sort of felt like I'd said goodbye to the character. But interestingly, I met up with a friend last night who's a really great thinker. And we were talking about like emotions and stuff like that and the powers of it. And I sometimes think your body doesn't know the difference between a fake emotion and a real emotion.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'd let go of the character was one thing, but I was still carrying those really harsh feelings and those emotions. So it took me a while to kind of get back to my usual kind of chipper self. But really, as soon as I was home, as soon as I was back on the golf course, as soon as I was with my friends, I was right back to myself.
Wow. There are now so many questions. I knew this would happen. Let me see if I can get some of them in here. Samira from Finland. Tom, could you tell us about your journey as an actor? What acting methods were your favorites when you started, and what about now? What kind of scene situations are hardest or most challenging to deliver? What are your methods to evolve as an actor? This is like a whole book.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Do you have a
Get
favorite
pen and
acting?
paper out. Hang on. That's a great question, actually, and really relevant to the show because Ben Perkins, who was my acting coach on The Impossible, has really become one of my closest friends in life. And we've worked together a few times. And I really employ him when I'm working on something where I really feel like I need some support. And what's been really interesting with Ben is that each time we've come to work together, it's been at a very different point in my career. So my style and my method has kind of changed. When we first met, when I was really young, I think I was 14 when we did The Impossible, 13, 14. Ben had never coached a kid before. This was his first time. And all of the emotion in that film, we drew upon personal experience and personal dread. You know, as a young kid, it's very difficult to figure out how to manipulate your emotions for the sake of the camera without making them real. You know, so at that point, and let me say, I was very comfortable doing so. This wasn't forced upon me. But, you know, we would think about awful things like saying goodbye to my mum forever, or saying goodbye to my brothers, or letting down my family, and those sorts of things would bring the emotion. But then as time went on, as I sort of started growing up, I realized that was too taxing for me. Like I couldn't keep tapping into these awful thoughts about my personal life. So I started working on certain techniques to kind of find the emotion in a different way. Benedict Cumberbatch gave me a great piece of advice once. We were making a film called The Current War, and I was always really blown away by the moment in The Imitation Game where he breaks down at the end. And I just asked him, like, how did you do that? Did you do that from a personal point of view, or did you do that from a technical point of view? And he kind of said both, which is something that I found really eye-opening. But what he did say is he he was able to kind of manipulate his diaphragm and almost laugh. And through the feeling of laughing, he could bring up that emotion of crying and sort of set himself off. And that's been something that's been super helpful for me. But then coming to work with Ben on this job, you know, now nearly 15 years on from when we first worked together, it was amazing to try and balance the technicality of it, the emotionality of it, not drawing on anything from my personal life, but really just experiencing what Akiva had been through, speaking to him, educating ourselves on the topic, creating as strong a character as we could so that we could, you know, make everything feel authentic without trying to suck out my own emotion, you know?
Yeah. This is a question from Gabriel Lerman of La Vanguardia in Spain. We've talked about how you could move the episodes around. Hey, maybe do number 5 first and that sort of thing. But he wants to know how difficult it was to act in the show without revealing the whole truth, which is a real tricky part of a role like this. And you know, when a show that's spread out over 10 episodes here.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of those decisions obviously come before you've been on set, you know, in the writing. We were very keen to kind of keep it back from Danny, what was happening to him. But then that said, you know, there are creative decisions that we made on set where we would do different versions. So sometimes in the earlier episodes, we would kind of push the switches a little bit more. And then we would do versions where we would really pull that back. Something I'm really proud of is that throughout the earlier episodes, there are loads of times where Danny switches into other characters. You just wouldn't necessarily pick up on it. And that's because lots of people suffer from multiple personality syndrome, but people don't know. People around them don't know. So it was a fine balance. It was something that it really took some fine tuning. And it was something that we really, really worked on in the edit. Thankfully, we weren't doing, you know, a piece of theater. It would have made it very difficult. Having the ability to chop and change things was super helpful. So yeah, so it just meant we had to be very thoughtful and take our time with everything.
There were a number of questions, Margaret Gardner, Yenny Nunn Katz, about what you do to relax, to get out of this character. Do you still play golf? Do you, you know, do different things like that? Do you dance? Do you dance around the house? Do you know, what do you do? What are your personal things to get away from it all that?
I wish I could say I danced around the house, but I'm so tired that I couldn't. No, I just, you know, I play golf on the weekends. I keep in touch with my friends. You know, I socialize as any, you know, young person in their 20s would. And really, when you're doing a show like this and it's as difficult and as complicated, you don't have that much time to unwind. You know, you get home from work and you're looking at the pages for the next day, you're prepping for what's to come. The weekends are obviously your time to decompress, which is when I'd go and play golf. But yeah, really, when I'm working, I'm working. And when I'm resting like I am now, I'm chilling and reading, and I'm loving watching all the films. I finally figured out how to log into my Academy portal. I've been paying the dues for fucking years and never been reaping the benefits. So now I finally got it on the television so I can watch all the films that are coming out, which I'm really enjoying.
That's not easy to do, to get that cast, they call it casting, get those pictures on a big screen TV in this world of digital. We have a couple of minutes, but Yenny also wants to know, are you still making the movie about Fred Astaire? Is that something?
The movie is still, we are developing it. You know, we obviously put it on pause while everyone was on strike. The movie is being developed, scripts are being written, meetings are being had. You know, like anything in the film industry, whether it happens or not is another thing, but we are working towards it as if it is happening. So hopefully we can find a way to tell the story in the way it needs to be told. And I'd love to put my tap shoes on again and to portray that character, but we'll have to wait and see.
And finally, Lily's iPad. A good morning question for Tom. Will there be a chance to go back to the superhero genre? Okay, so she wants to know, are you doing Spider-Man again?
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah, maybe. All I can say is that we have been actively engaging in conversations about what it could potentially look like for a fourth rendition of my character. Whether or not we can find a way to do justice to the character is another thing. You know, I feel very protective over Spider-Man. I feel very, very lucky that we were able to work on a franchise that got better with each movie, that got more successful with each movie, which I think is really rare. And I want to protect his legacy. So I won't make another one for the sake of making another one. It'll have to be worth the while of the character. But that said, if we can figure that out, I would be a fool not to put the suit back on again, because I owe everything to Spider-Man and I love the character. I love the people I get to work with. So I would love to tell another story, but I'll only tell it if we can find the right one.
Yeah. I thought the last one was truly a masterpiece, and you know, that's always hard to follow up, but there's always ways to go. We look forward to anything you do in the crowded room of Tom Holland's career. It's always fun to see what you turn up in and how you approach it. Thanks for joining us here and sharing all your thoughts about the crowded room. It's on Apple.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.